am a New Yorker, born and raised, born in Bethpage on Long Island in Nassau County, raised in Suffolk County. When I was 18 years old, I enlisted in the United States Air Force, actually in Times Square in that recruitment booth that some of you may have seen there. Went in the U.S. Air Force, went through Fort Hamilton, the processing center. Would go off for 4 years in the United States Air Force. I would serve as a firefighter in the United States Air Force, a crash firefighter. I was a crew chief on a rescue squad. While I was in the United States Air Force, I went to college at night, educated myself, got 2 years of college as an enlisted man, finished as a sergeant, would go through Officers Candidate School. The day I got out of the Air Force, I signed in the Marine Corps to go through Officers Candidate School to be a Marine officer. Went through the 2 summers of training. As I got my college degree, finished it, was an honor graduate going through training with the Marine Corps. But prior to taking my commissioning with the Marine Corps, the CIA approached me on the university campus where I was studying. I was at the University of New Mexico. They instructed me if I would come in and I was tested and interviewed, that they essentially would run me through a program and put me inside CIA's clandestine service. I would spend the next 23 years as an operative in the CIA's clandestine service. I would start and go through what's called the CST program, the Career Service Training Program, where you learn about operations, paramilitary operations. You skydive, you go through prisoner of war school, you go through how to run sources, you do all of those types of things. I would be assigned abroad in the Persian Gulf, my first assignment. Would then spend many of the next years in the Middle East. I would learn Persian. They would send me to a school for 11 months straight, 8 hours a day, speak Farsi. And the reason was the Iranian government was our largest enemy in that part of the world. I would run operations against the Iranian government, the Iranian Intelligence Service, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Later in CIA, as my career went along, and I would climb through the ranks because I was extremely successful, I would become the chief of Hezbollah operations. We talk about Israel and the fact that Israel has enemies. Its greatest enemies are Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. So I had spent a number of years and was the engine that was pulling the train on Iranian operations, and they would go over and they would make me the chief of Hezbollah operations globally. I had staff in CTC, that's the Counterterrorism Center in Washington, D.C., of 30 people, and I had operatives all around the world doing what I had been doing, and I was managing them against Hezbollah. Hezbollah had blown up the Israeli embassy in Argentina in '92, the EMEA building in '94. They killed the Marines in Beirut. They killed William Buckley, who I knew as a young officer, our chief of station there. So I had a lot of incentive to work against them. When our embassies were blown up in East Africa, we all remember August of 1998. They blew up our embassy. I'm the person they sent out there. I led the deployment, CIA's deployment. I had my own jet, flew out there. I actually got there several days before the FBI. We captured the individuals that were involved in that because we thought they were Hezbollah, right? Hezbollah had been doing those big car bombs, knocking buildings down. We got out there, we grabbed these guys. They weren't Shias, they were Sunnis. And they confessed to us they worked for Osama bin Laden. And that's when we knew that the world of terror had changed. It had been something that had been driven by Iran, the primary state supporter of terrorism, and now we were looking at a second-headed serpent here, where we're going to have to fight the Sunnis, and the Sunnis being driven by Al-Qaeda money and bin Laden. I would lead one of CIA's deployments into Afghanistan in 2000. I and a group of 5 other men would be inserted into Afghanistan when the Taliban controlled the whole place. And we were doing missions inside of Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. In Afghan clothing, I had a beard, the whole thing. Very interesting time. Our job then was to identify and capture either the number 2 or number 3 in Al-Qaeda and bring them out so that we could figure out what their next major attack was on us. The Clinton administration became too afraid and it withdrew us. We gave Clinton 5 different opportunities to kill bin Laden, capture him. He wouldn't take them. He was too afraid. He was afraid of the political costs. The very last opportunity to stop the attacks of 9/11 were in the fall of 2000 on that mission that I was on and was pulled out. I then assumed, look, these guys don't care about Latin, they don't care about the Middle East. We're we're killing ourselves on these operations out there, and our political masters don't have the stomach to go through with this. So I took an assignment out of the Middle East. I studied Spanish for 7 months, went off to Latin America, and was the chief of station, that's the senior CIA person in Latin America. I got there, only 2 months, you know, major change in my career, then 11 September occurred. CIA clandestine service has approximately, more, between 1,500 and 2,000 or more operations officers. CIA is a big organization, it's got maybe 20,000 people, but there's only a small number of operators. But out of that few thousand, I'm the person they called, and they selected, and they said, you will lead the big team for the invasion. So I left my team in Latin America, my family and the office that I was in charge of returned to Washington, and then I assembled the 6 paramilitary teams that would enter Afghanistan in 2001. I then inserted myself in. I went into the Somali Plains, where Ahmed Shah Massoud had been. The guy was assassinated 2 days before 9/11, and then worked with the new leader of the Northern Alliance, General Mohammed Fahim Khan. He and I and others on the front lines of the Somali Plains had a force of 6,000 Northern Alliance against 15,000 members of the Taliban. And using U.S. air power, a special forces team attached. I had 8 guys. Special forces team came in with 12. We duplicated this in different parts. We fought the Taliban there. And 110 CIA, 350 special forces defeated 60,000 members of the Taliban and 5,000 to 7,000 members of Al-Qaeda in a period of 7 weeks. We smoked them. They were in shock. They were expecting large numbers of American forces to come in there. We didn't give them targets. We didn't wear soldiers' uniforms. We ran around, sometimes in Afghan clothing, sometimes in clothing that you would pick up at Dick's Sports Store. When the conflict was over, actually, we pushed in East Kabul. I'm the person who also ran the Tora Bora operation. After I retired, I wrote a book called Jawbreaker, which recounted all of this, which was a New York Times bestseller. That was my first book. I've subsequently written 2 other books, a novel called The Walk-In, and a policy book called Human Intelligence, Counterterrorism, and National Leadership. I retired from CIA in 2005, wrote the books, lived in New York City. I came back to New York, but I didn't go back to Long Island Road. I lived in the city because I was writing books and I was doing a lot of television. Some of you may have seen me on Fox News or CNN doing counterterrorism commentary, and I was doing a lot of that. And I did that until 2007, and in 2007, I could see that the war had changed in Afghanistan. A lot of our young men and women were dying from improvised explosive devices. So I volunteered to go back for a year. I was retired from CIA. I went back as an advisor to the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And I went back out to Afghanistan to RC East, which is in Nangarhar province, and then worked on a group, a task force called Task Force Paladin. It was an 8-man team that responded. Has anybody here seen The Hurt Locker? The movie The Hurt Locker? One of those teams that you were on. What we did was we had some civilians like myself. We had a CIA guy or an FBI guy that were on there that were working on the team. And we were helping them investigate the networks. If there was a bombing and it looked like this, or the trigger devices looked one way, or depending on what the fingerprints on those devices were, we're trying to track it back to the groups that were doing the bombing. I spent a year there in uniform, had my head shaved, with these soldiers who were all very, very young. I was 50 years old. I can tell you my feet were killing me. The body armor and all the extra weight. That was the hard part there. Sore feet for 6 months after that tour. That's when you know you're over 50. I came back. Both of my children, my daughter is a naval intelligence officer. She served in the USS Stennis, graduated from the University of Virginia. My son is with the 82nd Airborne, and he is currently a platoon commander in Afghanistan. So, I understand what this is. I used to always think, I was always excited to go do these deployments myself. As a parent, it is a lot harder. It is a lot harder being left home. And I worry about him every day. I decided, after I finished that deployment in 2008, I worked for John McCain's campaign. I was the Veterans Coordinator for the state. That was my first taste of politics. Hadn't been involved. As a CIA officer, you do a lot of political reporting, you do all of that, so you're accustomed to all of this. But I hadn't been involved in politics, American politics. So I got involved in 2008, working with John McCain, organizing veterans around New York State. I didn't have much time to do it. They only let me in the campaign the last 3 months. I had 4,000 veterans signed up. I could have had 20,000 if they had let me begin in June. But it was a dysfunctional campaign in many ways, even though Senator McCain is a very honorable man. Didn't run a good campaign, but you know, things didn't work very well in that campaign. After I did that, you know, I had my own company. I do consulting, I lecture, I do a lot of lectures with U.S. military. I'm up in Canada working with the Canadian military, frequently lecturing them on improvised explosive devices, on what it's like to work with the Pashtun tribes, all the problems in the federally administered tribal area. I'm an expert on this part of the world because I've lived there for so many years, and I see